Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So my second cup of coffee is finally finished, and if you weren't up early this morning like I was, make sure you check out my episode on Chun-Li Countless Kicks. Yeah, we are kind of in a, let's just call it a mini spoiler season at this point, or maybe even more so a mini potential spoiler season, because yet again, we've got some potential spoilers that have not been confirmed, but this time it's not from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, it is from the brand new and upcoming Secret Lair Street Fighter. And of course, outside of that Chun-Li episode, also check out my episode on Blanca Ferocious Friend, and yeah, this is a very cool and very spicy card. But don't check out those episodes until you stay tuned for this episode on Zangief the Red Cyclone, and, okay, please, bear with me here, because his power is unbearable. Get it? Okay, that was terrible, wasn't it? Well, definitely blame Eddie for that joke. Okay, never mind. You can't blame Eddie for that joke. That was 100% on me, though it was approved by Eddie. Okay, well, maybe not approved, but definitely appreciated. And anyways, if I make any mistakes on this episode, make sure you blame Eddie, because it's always Eddie's fault, even though all Eddie does is help contribute to the show and, you know, have great discussions about the cards. But yeah, blame Eddie. Blame Eddie. Now, if you haven't seen that first episode of the day, the actual images of these cards came out in one image, and all the cards are pretty small, but you can read the vast majority of the text on them. So as you notice on this one, there is a question mark, and yeah, this is a custom version of the card. Again, a big thank you to MTG.design for existing and helping me make custom versions of cards. So yeah, again, I will say that these are potential spoilers because they have not been officially confirmed, though the actual images seem to be very legitimate, and yeah, some of them basically utilize art that came out after the actual image came out, so yeah, I am 99.999% sure that these are real. That being said, obviously, again, yeah, there's a question mark on this card in the bottom right because, well, part of the card was cut off, so we don't know exactly what that is, but it really doesn't impact what this card really does. And yeah, actually, maybe I even need more coffee because I made yet another mistake on a custom card. Spinning pile driver on the card should be italicized. My apologies. Regardless, let's go through the card and talk about what it does and what kind of a deck you might want to build around it. So, Zangief the Red Cyclone is a 7 question mark again human warrior that costs 2 black, red, green. It must be blocked if able. It has Iron Muscle, which means as long as it's your turn, Zangief has Indestructible. It also has Spinning Pile Driver. Whenever Zangief deals damage to a creature, if that creature is dealt excess damage this turn, that creature's controller sacrifices a non-creature, non-land permanent. So first up, in guessing what that actual toughness is on this card, it really doesn't impact it too much. I mean, obviously there are certain circumstances where it does. I mean, on your turn, it's indestructible, so its toughness probably doesn't matter unless it's being blocked by a creature. Maybe that is Infect that can assign -1/-1 counters to it. But yeah, it might be all the way, down to, let's say, even 2, like a somewhat, reminiscent card to this one, like Zergo Helm Smasher, which is a 7/2 for 5 mana and, 3 colors, so it could be, basically that. Or, maybe it's all the way up to 5 toughness. I really am not sure, and we will not know until we see the actual card. That being said, again, really not that big of a deal, because what you want to do with this card is, well, attack with it, and attack with it, and do some other things that we'll get to here in a second. Again, Zangief has to be blocked if able, and it's indestructible, so you're pretty much just, free to swing out on an opponent, and they are forced to block. And when they do, well, you're probably going to be able to deal excess damage to at least one creature, and when you do that, that creature's controller has to sacrifice, a non-creature, non-land permanent. So whether that's one of their artifacts like a Mana Rock or an enchantment, or yeah, even a Planeswalker, they're going to have to sacrifice something most likely when you do hit. And of course, there are plenty of ways to get even more value out of this, or maybe I should say take more advantage of this to make your opponents have to sacrifice even more things. Overall, yeah, a solid card and one that can be used in some pretty cool ways and also in some pretty, well, let's just say brutal ways. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think your opponents are going to find Zangief to be unbearable to play against. See, I did it again. Okay, I'll stop. Maybe. Anyways, really quick before we jump into cards that work with this commander, I do want to mention something that I mentioned in pretty much all these episodes. If you do like this commander and this design, do not feel pressured to buy this Secret Lair. If you want to buy the Secret Lair and you like the cards in it, great, but do not feel pressured to do so if you only like one of the cards. Because now with these kinds of Secret Lairs, again, keep in mind that they've changed the way that they go about them, where now in the future, I believe 6 months or so from now, they are going to be coming out in set boosters as magic cards. And I should say, magic characters that are the exact same card. You know what I mean? So there will be actual magic versions of these cards that you can get at that time. And of course, if you can't wait to, play around this kind of a commander and you want to build around it now, I'm sure there are plenty of playgroups out there that are going to be completely fine with players, proxying it and being like, hey, can I build around this right now and play it? Sure, many playgroups are going to be okay with that and say go for it. But as always, make sure you talk to your playgroups first. Commander is a social format, so just talk. Now with that said though, let's talk about some cards that work very well with this brand new commander. First up, the very first types of cards that came to my mind were cards like Lure. Lure is an enchantment aura that says enchant creature, and it says all creatures able to block enchanted creature do so. Now again, Zangief already has a requirement that it must be blocked, but obviously it doesn't say how many creatures have to block it, so most opponents are just gonna be like, okay, I'll chump block with one creature, then I'm probably gonna lose to it anyways, and yeah, then I just have to sacrifice one thing. But with something such as Lure, you can force an opponent to block with all their creatures that are able to block it, and yeah, this can be devastating against certain decks. If maybe someone has a token build and has a ton of small creatures on the board and, they're untapped and have to block, well, your Zangief coming through as, a 7 power creature can take out quite a few of those tokens and deal excess damage to them, and then, yeah, they've got to sacrifice quite a few things. Now, obviously, an even safer and probably more effective version of Lure is actually Nemesis Mask because it's an equipment versus an aura, so, if you actually lose Zangief, you don't lose out on this, it stays in play. But yeah, that equip cost is 3, so definitely going to be worth re-equipping onto this commander, and yeah, you can do a lot of work with this. And of course, there are a good amount of Lure-type one-off effects out there like Armed and Dangerous, or should I say mostly Dangerous, but both can be very effective together. Armed says target creature gets +1/+1 and gains double strike until end of turn, and Dangerous says all creatures able to block target creature this turn do so. So yeah, this can help Zangief dish out even more damage, take out more things, deal more excess damage to things, and yeah, be able to just make opponents have to sacrifice quite a few things in one turn. And of course, Zangief works really well with all these because yeah, it's indestructible, so you're pretty safe to just swing out whenever, and just get blocked by whatever. Now, outside of Lure effects, a type of card that Eddie brought up, which is a fantastic addition to a Zangief deck, are cards that deal with fighting. For example, Prey Upon says target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Zangief does not specify that it has to be, combat damage. It can be any type of damage that's dishing out. So yeah, fight works perfectly. Again, especially since Zangief is indestructible on your turn, you just fight during your turn. Zangief is not going to get taken out. Your opponent's creature is going to get taken out and most likely be dealt excess damage, so they're going to have to sacrifice something. So then a simple 1-mana Prey Upon is basically a 1-mana creature removal spell and forcing an opponent to sacrifice a non-creature non-land permanent. Obviously, there are other more flexible fight spells as well, like Inscription of Abundance, which can do multiple things. It's an instant for 1 and a green, but it's got kicker for 2 and a green. You choose 1, but if it's kicked, you choose any number instead. Put 2/+1 counters on target creature. Target player gains X life or X the greatest power among creatures they control. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. So yeah, if you've got the mana for it, sure, kick it, but if not, yeah, just a simple fight spell can be very effective in this deck. And of course, a repeatable way to fight like Ulvenwald Tracker can really help you out as well. It just has pay 1 and a green, tap target creature control fights another target creature. So again, this basically helps you do double duty with creature removal and non-creature non-land removal as well. And other types of cards that Eddie pointed out that can really help as well are cards that actually give your opponents creatures, so then you have more fight targets or more things that your opponents have to block with, etc, etc, etc. So a card like a Crow and Horse can really come in handy, a 0/4 with Defender, and when it enters the battlefield, an opponent gains control of it, and you get to pick that opponent, and at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent creates a 1/1 white soldier creature token. So maybe give this to an opponent they actually don't want to attack, and then, well, they start making tokens for, well, you and your other opponents and then those little 1/1s just become fantastic fodder for you to fight, or for you to, swing out and have a lore effect on your commanders so that your opponents have to sacrifice more things. And of course, an include that really doesn't take up a spot in the deck, just a land spot, is Forbidden Orchard, and this is a fantastic card. Unfortunately, I think it's decently expensive these days, but yeah, it can tap for 1 mana of any color, and when you tap it, target opponent creates a 1/1 color spirit creature token. So essentially a command tower that actually benefits you by giving an opponent a creature, which is just more fodder for you to hit with Zangief. And speaking of benefiting from hitting things, how about Basilisk Collar? It's an equipment that costs 2 to equip, and it says equip creature has Death Touch and Lifelink. Again, you can thank Eddie for pointing this one out as well. I mean, Death Touch is fantastic with Zangief because now you just have to assign 1 damage to destroy, most creatures essentially with Zangief. So you just have to assign, 1 extra point of damage for that to be considered excess. Basically, assign 2 damage to any creature you want to take out and force your opponent to sacrifice something with it. On top of that, obviously, Lifelink can really come in handy with a commander that wants to dish out damage, especially when you're going to be fighting a ton as well. And of course, you can double up or even triple up on damage with things like Gratuitous Violence and Fiery Emancipation. Gratuitous Violence says if a creature you control deal damage to a permanent or player, deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. This can make it a lot easier to dish out excess damage to creatures, more and more creatures, with the more and more creatures blocking it, to make your opponents have to sacrifice a ton of things. And on top of that, obviously, it turns your commander into a 2-shot kill. And speaking of that, Fiery Emancipation is a tripler. If a source you control deal damage to a permanent or player, deals triple that damage to that permanent or player instead. So yeah, even more so with this one. And keep in mind, again, Zangief has 7 power. Times 3, that's 21, making Zangief just with this into a 1-shot KO on any opponent it can get through on. So yeah, that can be quite the deadly card in this deck, though. Again, I think this card is decently expensive these days. Wizards, reprint it, please. Thank you. And actually, another card that came up in the previous episode that Eddie again mentioned would be fantastic for this commander as well is Chandra's Ignition. Chandra's Ignition is a sorcery for 3 red, and it says target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature and each opponent. So this basically says, hey, Zangief, why don't you just deal 7 damage to everything? Obviously, it hits your opponent's faces, which is lovely, but it hits all their creatures as well, and chances are that's probably going to be enough to take out basically every creature on the board, and probably deal excess damage to them too. So then, all those creatures' controllers have to sacrifice that many permanents to the creatures that they lost to excess damage. Though, do keep in mind that this deals damage to your creatures as well, your other creatures, so if it takes those creatures out, well, you've got to sacrifice non-creature, non-land permanents as well, so please keep that in mind. But yeah, you probably won't have too many other creatures on the board under your control for the most part, and yeah, this can really come in handy in a lot of situations, and probably can be game-ending in a lot of situations too. And a somewhat similar card to this one is Arc Bond. It's an instant that says choose target creature. Whenever that creature is dealt damage this turn, deals that much damage to each other creature and each player. This one can actually even more so be a game-ending card in the right situation. Again, if you've got a lure type effect on your commander and all your opponent's creatures have to block it, well, it's going to be taking quite a bit of damage depending on how big your opponent's army is. I mean, if your opponent blocks with, a total of like 20 power or so, hey, Zangief's going to be taking 20 damage. I mean, it's indestructible, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, now you take that damage and you say, okay, everyone and everything is taking 20 damage too. And yeah, Zangief's going to be able to take out basically everything with that. And then everyone's going to have to sacrifice things again. And yeah, again, keep in mind that will count you as well if it's taking out your creatures with excess damage too. I mean, one other thing to definitely consider when building around this commander is, well, it's indestructible, and like basically any other indestructible commander, you can definitely take advantage of that by being like, hey, I'm just gonna wipe the board with something like Damnation, which, is basically just Wrath of God, destroy all creatures that can't be regenerated, and then, yeah, my commander sticks around and none of your creatures do, most likely, let's say. And of course, outside of Damnation, there are other kind of, Wrath-type spells in these colors. I mean, Blasphemous Act can be a fantastic one for multiple reasons with this kind of a deck. A sorcery for 8 and a red. Obviously, it's never going to cost that much, though, because it's going to cost 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield. So typically, you're going to pay, what, a single mana for this? To deal 13 damage to every single creature on the board. And yeah, in combination with your commander, this can be incredible. Again, if you've got a lure type card on your commander, you can force all your opponent's creatures to actually block it, or should I say one opponent's creatures, I probably keep missaying that. Anyways, you force all of one player's creatures to block it. You probably can't deal enough excess damage to all those creatures to take them all out and also, get that trigger. But with Blasphemous Act, it's kind of like, okay, as long as Zangief actually did 1 damage to each of their creatures, now Blasphemous first act is like, now let's take out all those creatures and deal excess damage to them. Because again, Zangief specifically reads if that creature was dealt excess damage this turn, it doesn't care about dealing damage during combat or whatnot. Or, if you can't wait for Zangief to take out all of your opponent's non-creature, non-land permanents, just use Nevinral's Disc to do so. I mean, except for Planeswalkers. You know what I mean. By paying 1, you can tap to destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. So, yeah, just do it during your turn. Zangief will stick around, and your opponent's things, and, some of your things, won't, but that's okay. But more likely, since you do have black in your color identity, and you are able to tutor things up incredibly efficiently, you might go get this next card more often than not. Which, of course, is World Slayer, and yeah, basically, with any indestructible commander, or commander that is even temporarily indestructible, this thing can be game-ending. It's an equipment that costs 5 and it costs 5 to equip, and it says, whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, destroy all permanents other than World Slayer. Yeah, if you can get World Slayer attached to Zangief and be able to get through on at least one opponent, all you have to do is hit that one opponent, everything else goes bye-bye, except for, again, Zangief, because it's indestructible on your turn, and World Slayer. And that includes lands, so again, game over. Or okay, fine, it pretty much is game over. I mean, if your opponent next turn plays a Plains and then a Swords to Plowshares on Zangief, sure, it's going to take longer for the game to end, but basically game over. And kind of with that same train of thought, again, because Zangief does have that indestructibility on your turn, it is very safe, for the most part, to again cast something like a Soul's Majesty to target it, and really take advantage of that power. Soul's Majesty is a sorcery for 4 and a green that says draw cards equal to the power of target creature you control, or in this case, yeah, draw 7 cards for 5 mana. Of course, a somewhat safer way to do this is with Rishkar's Expertise. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control, so it can count any creature that you have, not just Zangief if it gets dealt with. But yeah, you may cast a spell with mana value 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost as well, so yeah, this card is fantastic. And yet another Power Matters card that can take advantage of Zangief's power is Traverse the Outlands. It says search your library for up to X basic land cards where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Put those cards on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle your library. Yeah, 5 mana, ramp 7, what's not to love? Again, it is not foolproof, again, with Zangief having Indestructible, but it does, protect it from a good amount of things, just not, exile or bounce spells. That being said, if all of this wasn't enough, one other thing that you might want to consider are some, well, pretty, let's just say salty cards with It That Betrays and Tergrid. It That Betrays is an 11/11 Eldrazi for 12 mana that has Annihilator 2, so whenever it attacks, defending players sacrifice 2 permanents, and on top of that, whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent, put that card on the battlefield under your control. So now it's not enough that with Zangief, you are, forcing your opponents to block it, and, lose creatures, and sacrifice other permanents because of that, but now when they do sacrifice those things, you get them because It That Betrays says so. Or, if you want to save 7 mana, and yeah, Tergrid God of Salt, you can utilize Tergrid God of Salt for pretty much the exact same thing. She has Menace, and whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from a graveyard on the battlefield under your control. So yeah, if you want to make your friends a little salty with this unbearable commander, there I did it again, sorry, you can. Or should I say, as long as your playgroup's okay with it. Regardless, now as this episode is coming to a close, it's time for me to give you my final thoughts on Zangief, the Red Cyclone. Yeah, this commander has a lot of potential, and again, there are some potentially brutal things that you can do with it. I mean, like all indestructible commanders, or commanders that are even just temporary indestructible, you can really take advantage of that and wipe the board clean, essentially, except for it. But yeah, there's some really spicy things that you can do with it with, lure cards or cards like Chandra's Ignition. And yeah, there's some really cool interactions there and some things that can be very surprising to your opponents. I can see a good amount of players out there, though, being pretty excited about this Jund commander. It definitely takes Jund in a direction that, well, is very unique and interesting. And it'll also be very interesting to see, what that toughness actually ends up being. I mean, again, I think it could be anywhere from, 2 to probably, I wouldn't think it's going to be more than 5, but you never know. It might. Again, at the end of the day, it really probably doesn't matter all that much, though. And again, also at the end of the day, I just want to remind you that if you do like this commander, you should not feel forced to buy something like a Secret Lair like this one. If you like the Secret Lair, great, buy it. But if you only want this commander, maybe wait for the actual Magic version of this to come out. Or, again, if some playgroups are okay with it, I'm sure there are going to be players that are going to be asking if it's okay that they can proxy that. And again, Commander is a social format, so just talk. But yeah, again, thank you for bearing with me. Okay, last one, I promise, through this potential spoiler. And yeah, there are other potential spoilers out there that seem to be pretty exciting, so be on the lookout for an episode around those. And with that, the show has come to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thank you again, and have a good one.